This time on the show, SSH and encryption, algorithms both symmetric and asymmetric, ciphers both block and stream. How does SSH key architecture work, and why are weak keys so sucky? Plus, ponies. All that and more this time on Hak5. This episode of Hak5 is brought to you by Domain.com.
Hello and welcome to Hak5. My name is Darren Kitchen.
I'm Shannon Morse.
This is your weekly dose of technolust.
And what are we getting into today?
We're getting into some fun encryption stuff.
Ooh, delicious. I love encryption. Love it so much. Oh my god, TrueCrypt, my best friend.
Yeah?
Yeah, seriously.
Well, we're basically going to talk about how, like, you know, when you take some stuff and then you put it into this big box that says encryption.
Yeah.
And then it comes out with this other fun, happy stuff. It's like, okay, but, you know.
What happens in the box?
What's in the box? What's in the box?
Yay!
Yeah.
Cool.
And so basically this whole encryption thing is like, da-na-na-na.
Awesome. You found a key. Ha! Get it?
Yeah, take this, or don't go alone, or something else like that. Where is my
like that.
thingy? There it is. Awesome. This is also our second episode going live to tape. So how fun is that?
Dude.
I haven't seen the comments in the last episode.
I'm pretty excited about it.
Out, but yeah, this is
that episode
gonna be good
on
for
YouTube?
us.
I guess it's on YouTube.
Yes.
Isn't it?
So, but before we get into what I will dub, you know, SSH into your heart and encryption.
Best song ever.
Basically, a like 1,000-foot view. Let's go ahead and do our little gift from a fan thing, because I want to see what goodies we have.
Definitely a little gift from a fan. I want you to open this.
Good things come in small packages. Who is this from?
There's a letter in there.
What the? Wait. Here's the letter. Paul.
It says, "Dear Hak5, you guys rock, therefore I got you a present. Life Rain."
What?
His name is Life Rain. And he
It's
got
a cat butt.
It's all yours. It's a cat butt bag for your change.
Yay! I have cat butts
and
now.
it literally says cat butt and has a little nyan cat in front of it going,
cats' butts.
Nyan.
They're all winking at me.
Necky.
All right. Keep change in there, or other nefarious PCBs connected to batteries.
I love it. I think it's adorable.
I think that is really cool. I love weird stuff.
I do too.
I like the material
There really
too.
are cat butts on there.
Yep.
I guess
Awesome.
we shouldn't show that on the camera.
Well, thanks so much. That was
Yes, thank you, Life Rain.
I really appreciate it.
That's awesome.
Okay. Let's get into some fun, happy encryption stuff. And
All right.
so basically we've got a lot of terms this week.
Yes.
And we're going to break it down, and they all kind of build on each other. And this leads into like the bigger discussion that we've been talking about this whole time in proxies in the context of SSH. And so it's good to understand some of the lower level workings of this. And we've talked about some of the ways in which the SSH protocol works. We talked about channels and streams, the different kinds of like authentication mechanisms. So we talked
private
about
and public keys, passwords.
So this week we're going to talk about SSH, the way that the key architecture works, the way that the algorithms work. And in order to do that, and I know some of these may seem like a little like basic at first, but they build on each other, and I think it's going to be really good.
Okay.
So why don't we just start with the very basics of encryption.
Yay!
And decryption. And so encryption is basically taking plain text and turning it into ciphertext, and decryption is the opposite. It's taking the ciphertext and turning it into plain text.
Okay.
So then that brings up the point of what is plain text?
Yeah, I know what plain text is.
Yeah, what's that?
Those are those completely open passwords that I give to some of my favorite fashion sites that I buy stuff from. And then when I forget my password, they send the password to my email address.
Yes.
Like, no hash, no click on this link to change your password, nothing like that. They just
And
send
as
me
we
the
know,
password.
that email is totally open and unencrypted. You're not using PGP. We'll get to that's on the roadmap here.
Yep.
But that's totally unencrypted, and that man in the middle could totally grab your plain text password out of there
plain text offenders.
and own your
Not good.
your fashion sites. Sometimes called clear text. Basically, the idea here is if I were to give you this, it's all English.
This
you
is
can read
clear
it.
text,
This
yes.
is clear text, right? Or your language of choice.
Yes.
But you know, the opposite of that, once it's been encrypted, is ciphertext. And so
I thought this was
ciphertext,
like hashes or something.
no, ciphertext is what we call the result of plain text when it's gone through encryption.
Okay.
Okay, and that's really all it is.
The dictionary term for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I guess to say ciphertext implies, well, there's a cipher. So what is a cipher? Well, a cipher is just an algorithm in the context of encryption. And so we've talked about, and that's another of the terms, moving through these quick, algorithm. So an algorithm is like a recipe, it's a process. It's basically like do this, then this, then this. You know, take the eggs and the flour and put it together with the gluten. I don't know, I don't cook, but you would think with the last name of kitchen I'd cook. But if I did, you know, I could
just
write.
mix drinks.
Yeah, no joke. Boy, can I too. You can think of like algorithms like basically a procedure to process data, to do a lot of different things.
It's a mathematical equation to
There you go.
encrypt your data.
Yeah, and so a cipher is an algorithm in the context of cryptography, just like in the context of search. Google has a search algorithm that does rankings of the different websites and stuff like that. So big word for math. And so that step-by-step calculation will allow us to take our plain text and encrypt it with that cipher and get our ciphertext, right? Okay. And we've thus far been talking about this in the context of our authentication with the SSH server. We've been talking about getting authenticated, like, hey, it knows I am who I say I am, and I know it's the server it says it is.
Yeah.
Right. And for that, we've been using asymmetric encryption algorithms.
And asymmetric is when you have a separate key on both ends, but both of the keys look at each other and say, I agree with you.
Yes.
Hence, they're asymmetric.
Yes.
They're not the same.
We've drawn this a few times, but in this case, we've got one key that's for encryption and another key that's for decryption. And you basically need to put those two together to create a relationship where you can exchange encrypted information.
Right.
Okay. And sometimes it's called a public key encryption, or sometimes we call them public-private key pairs because they come in pairs. You need both of them. And we've established that we use them for authentication and for authorization. You know, we put the key fingerprint in the known host file. We put the ID RSA in our SSH folder, and the ID_RSA.pub we put in the authorized keys folder over on the file on the server, and that gets us authenticated, and that's asymmetric.
Okay.
And so to talk about this, let's go ahead and dissect a little bit about the way that SSH does its key architecture.
Okay.
So SSH key architecture. Now, in this case, there are 4 different types of keys that it uses, and we've already talked about the first one. The first one is our user key. And that user key is a persistent key.
So it never changes. Is that right?
For the most part. I mean, unless
Or does this mean it changes like once every hour?
No, this actually means that it changes whenever you want to generate it. So this is the key that you generated with PuTTY keygen.
Right.
This is one that I generated with SSH keygen.
Yeah.
And it's persistent in that once you copy your public key over to the server, those are your private and public key pairs.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, you could go in and delete them and create new ones. There you go.
If you want to.
For the most part, they're persistent.
Okay.
And that meaning they don't even change like on a session by session basis, and until you actively go and do something, they're going to be there the next time, and that's good. And so those are the user keys, and they're used to prove your identity, and those are asymmetric. They're these guys over here.
Yes.
You put this one leave on your computer, and this one you put on the server, and then you get authenticated, right? You also need to make sure that the computer is who it says it is. And
Very important.
For that, we have the host key, and that again is a persistent key.
And that's asymmetric as well, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
We store a hash equivalent of this public key that the server feeds us, and we take that hash and we call it a key fingerprint, and we put that in our known host file.
Ah, yes.
So that the next time we connect to it, we can check it, and if everything matches with that hash, that we can say, okay, you are authentic, right? And so we don't accidentally connect to the wrong server and stuff like that.
But if you reinstall your server or something like that, you'd have to make completely new keys.
Okay, so like everything in computing, I say this is persistent, I say that this is persistent, and I mean that they are persistent until
you want to change it.
Yeah, and so we've actually talked about that. If like you were to reinstall OpenSSH or whatever your SSH server of choice is, then you're going to get a different set of public and private keys, host keys, but for the most part, though, if you don't do that, they're going to stay persistent. Now, I do want to, I know that we've been talking about SSH2 in all of these contexts, but I do want to mention an SSH1 key that we don't use anymore, but it's kind of interesting, and
what's the difference between SSH1 and 2? 2's more
We
secure.
talked about this in the first one when we started going into SSH. 2 is more secure, 1 is susceptible to some man-in-the-middle attacks. And SSH2 can be forced to downgrade in some circumstances, and that's why I always recommend to take the SSH1 protocol option out of your server config.
Okay.
But SSH1 had one of the key differences was that it had a fourth key that we no longer use, and that is the server key. And so
sounds
this
kind of
is
like the host key.
Exactly. People really confuse these two a lot, and that's because the host key is used to authenticate the server.
The server, yeah.
The server key, what does that guy do? Well, it as well, the thing about this is it's not a persistent key, it's temporary.
So this one go and change every hour or something?
Yes.
Ah.
It doesn't change every hour. However, it changes something else every hour. And so basically what it does is it's also an asymmetric key. And it's only used in the SSH1 protocols, and it's used to generate a session key, okay? And this session key is what's used for actually securely communicating. And the thing about this is the server key is used for rekeying. And so this guy rekeys the session key every hour or every gigabyte on an SSH1 connection. And the reason that it does that is for this thing called perfect forward secrecy. And so I guess that would be another term over here. Yes, perfect forward secrecy. And so the point of perfect forward secrecy is that it ensures that if either this key or this key were to fall into the wrong hands, you could maintain perfect forward secrecy by using the server key here to regenerate, the last key, a session key. And so the session key is also temporary. But here's the thing about the session key. The session key is symmetric.
So it's the same on both ends?
Yes. And there are actually several session keys involved here. There's, they're symmetric in that there's only one of these, right? One of these goes to the server, and one of these stays on the host, right?
Right.
And they are used for the encryption, and there's several. There's a separate one that's used for server to client. There's another one that's used from client to server, and then there are a couple others that are used for integrity checks. We mainly just refer to the session key, though, as we just say the session key, because there's a bunch of them. We don't say keys, but regardless, for this context, there's the session key, and those are the user, host, server, and session are the four. In SSH2. This is on 2, 2, 2. This one is only on 1.
Okay.
We have session.
So we
host,
don't
and user.
use this one anymore, the server temporary?
No, we don't need to. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
But the session key, the neat thing about that is being a symmetric key, it is what we use to create our secure communications between the client and the server. And it's pretty cool because a symmetric key algorithm basically, like I said, uses identical keys for both encryption and decryption, and this represents what's known as a shared secret. So the thing about a shared secret is that really this thing right here is data that you and I should only know, nobody else.
Okay.
And so this could be a password, it could be a passphrase, or it could just be a big ass random number that we use. And based on that, we can have secure communications. Now, as you might imagine, the exchange of that is very, very important. And so the way that SSH works is that upon the first time you connect, it goes ahead and it uses what's called a key agreement protocol. And the nice thing about SSH, when it uses that key agreement protocol to share its symmetric key, there's actually, like we've talked about how when you log into a server, you can request password authentication or public key authentication or keyboard interactive and all those different ones.
Some are better than others.
Well, the nice thing about this in SSH, at least as far as this is concerned in simplicity, is that there's only one algorithm that's actually used for that key exchange, and that is the Diffie-Hellman key agreement algorithm. And we could do an entire episode on this right here, but suffice it to say, this is, the way that this works is when we first create an asymmetric connection, we're using our public and private keys that we use right here, our user and our host. We use these asymmetric keys with the Diffie-Hellman to pass our session keys, to pass our symmetric keys. Because if I were to just...
So when you pass the session key, does that mean that the data that's being shared back and forth is going to be encrypted as well?
Yes, so the data is going to be encrypted with this session key. So it's very important that we don't just like, I can't just create a TCP connection to you.
You could connect, and that would be secure, but how do I know that everything that's happening during that connection is going to be secure?
Well, that's why we use the Diffie-Hellman algorithm with our asymmetric keys to exchange this, so that an eavesdropper couldn't get a hold of this. Okay, because if we just created a connection, I said, "Hey, Shannon, we're gonna use ponies as our password,"
so this is almost like
then
just whispering a password to somebody, whatever my wireless internet connection is back at home.
You know what? That's a great example of what's known as a pre-shared key. A pre-shared key, or you may know it oftentimes abbreviated as PSK, as in like WPA, TAC PSK.
Yes.
And so that's
what it stands for.
So this is a great example. Like, so okay, your home wireless network, right? You have a password on it.
Yes.
And you're not using some crazy radius authentication server. You don't have like some enterprise stuff set up. You just got a password.
It's a home network. Don't care that
much.
Well,
if a guest comes over, how do you give them your password?
I just say it to them while I'm sitting on the living room sofa with them.
Okay. Well, that's actually what's called out of band. And what that means is...
Because it's not going on in here somewhere.
Yeah, typically, in the case of your wireless, this right here is the band. And so to communicate that shared key out of it is in like just by voice communication, human relay next to each other, whatever. That's not using this technology. It's using a different technology. It's using, good old-fashioned, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
So
and hopefully nobody is listening with a cup on the other side of the wall.
Well, there you go. I mean, you ever have like somebody be like, okay, I'll email you the credit card number, but I'll call you and tell you the expiration date or whatever. I mean, you worked in a bank. You saw some ridiculously horrible.
I've seen some crazy, horrible security.
We're not going to get into this today, but that's another fun one.
Yeah.
Anyway, they frown upon the shared keys out of band, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I bring this up because our symmetric key is the one that we really haven't talked about in SSH yet, and we've been really focusing on the user and the host. We don't need to worry about the server because that's SSH1. We don't care about that. But our session we really haven't gotten into, and so that symmetric key which is using a shared secret, which is exchanged with Diffie-Hellman, as opposed to a pre-shared key that would be exchanged out of band, is this symmetric key can be either a stream cipher,
like a river,
or a block cipher.
like a castle.
Try to think that if it was a river, it wouldn't be wearing shoes. That's just because my coat's a little brown.
Yes.
So I guess here's an example of that, right? So a stream cipher would look like this. We're going to take OMG ponies.
That is an excellent password right there.
Hey, I don't, whatever. First thing comes to mind, right? So say like we're going to securely exchange OMG ponies.
Okay.
Well, the first thing that might happen in the sense of a stream cipher, another symmetric key cipher, where the plaintext bits, see these are plaintext bits, well we want these to come out as encrypted bits. And so the way that this works is that with a stream cipher, we're going to take the first bit. In this case, it's an O. And so this right here, this OMG ponies, is our plaintext. Okay?
Yes.
We're going to send this right here to our cipher, which, as we know, is basically just our encryption algorithm. In this case, the encryption algorithm happens to be symmetric, and it happens to be of the stream cipher type. Okay? And so this right here is going to say, oh, you gave me an O. And I'm going to take some other cool data. I'm going to take these random numbers that we come up with this key stream and whatnot, and I'm going to say that equals R, because R is a fun letter, or it equals 7, or something like that. Okay. Well,
sounds like it takes a long time.
Actually, it doesn't. It's really fast at processing these because it's like one bit at a time. It's like, give me a bit, it's that. Give me a bit, it's that. And so it only ever has to process kind of like little numbers, like. Like in grade school math where you're like, oh, 2 plus 2, that's easy. But if I gave you like 478 plus 254, you'd have to like think about it for a second. So in that case, the difference being that would be, for example, taking all of this. Okay, so that wouldn't be so this right here is an example of a stream cipher. This right here would be an example of, and then there's another cipher here. This is an example of a block cipher, and that is to say we take a block of data, right? In this case, it's OMG ponies. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Say we use a stream cipher that has a bit length of 12, okay? That would mean that every time we take a block of data, it has to be 12.
Okay.
This is only 9.
So what happens if it's just 9?
We pad it. We put, for example, let's just say 0, 0, 0 at the end. There's a lot of different things when it comes to padding, but let's just say we add some extra crap at the end so that it's always 12 bytes. Okay. Well, so now we take these 12 bytes and then we say...
Put them into the cipher again.
And then we end up with RX2147L Papa Golf Sierra, whatever. And so you end up with in this case, again, our ciphertext.
I have another question for you about these. You said that this one runs really fast. Why does this one go slower?
Yeah, the idea is that this uses more memory, more CPU power.
Because it's doing everything at once?
Yeah, and so an example of a block cipher might be, for example, AES, which we typically see 128. And so this 128 here is saying, give me 128 bits. Yeah. In this case, with ponies only being 9, we would give it 119 zeros or padding. They wouldn't be zeros, but we would pad it with that much for that block to count.
Hence why
a little bit more bloated.
That one,
Well, in fact, the thing is, the more bits you can choose, you can see all the time. There's a 256 version of AES. You can, the more bits you do, the more computationally expensive it is going to be for you to do this.
But the more secure.
I think that, and I'm no like crazy cryptographicalist mathematicianer making these up here, but But I think there is actually a level of diminishing returns, and I'm not the best expert to speak on where that sweet spot is. I personally choose the largest. If I'm using a block cipher, I'm using the largest I possibly can. You know, if you get the option to say, for example,
what I do too.
When you create your RSA keys or your DSA keys, and it says, do you want 128 or 256? Or I'm sorry, 1024 or 2040, 20, bleh.
You choose 2048.
2048, thank you. Yeah, if they said, hey, do you want 4096? I'd say, I'll take that.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's basically what it is. And so, as you can imagine, you know, the more bits go in, the more memory it takes to hold them in there, the longer it takes, because it's like the difference between that math and that math.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so the reason I bring all of this up is because that there are a lot of different keys, or not keys, there are a lot of different algorithms that can be used by SSH2. Okay, so let's talk about SSH2 algorithms. Now, just like when it comes to authenticating with an SSH server, you get to choose as the client. You're like, hey, I want to authenticate with some passwords.
I want to do private and public.
I want to use GSS API. And I guess the fourth one would be keyboard interactive, right?
Yeah.
And so you get to choose. Well, the same thing with SSH and algorithms is you get to choose which algorithms you want to use, and there's a variety of different reasons that you may choose one or the other. Now, we mentioned how with like these asymmetric keys, our user key and our host key, we normally, like we were just talking about how, are you going to use the 2048 or are you going to use 1024, you know, the RSA or DSA? Well, those are the two that we use for our user key. So here we go, algorithms. Let's see, our public keys.
Which we are very familiar with.
Yeah, well these can either be, like I just said, RSA or DSA. Just like our hash functions.
Hashes, yay!
These relate to our host in that we take the public and private keys from our host and we use a hash function to generate what we call the, help me out here, it's the key fingerprint.
Ah, okay.
And that's the thing that we store in known hosts, right?
Yes.
Well, those use a hash function, and that can either be SHA-1 or MD5.
Yes, our favorite MD5 hashes.
Yes. Likewise, and we haven't talked about this yet, but like those are both asymmetric, our user and our host, but our session key, which is symmetric, can use a plenty. So our symmetric algorithms can be plenty. There can be 3 DES. It could be blowfish, 2 fish,
3 fish,
blue fish, red fish, green fish. I don't know. No, 2 fish. The other ones would be cast 128, as well as idea.
I haven't heard of so many of these.
I know. And then finally, and this is the one we'll talk about today, ARC4. Okay. And this is really why I bring all of these up, is because you know, you get that choice, and so that leads into like, you know, what do you choose and why do you choose them and stuff like that. And so that's part of the larger discussion, but it's important to understand all this first.
Okay.
I guess I should mention that there really technically is a 4th algorithm type, and that is for your compression. You know, SSH can be big. You want to tighten it down anytime you can. And the algorithm that's used for compression is actually zlib. It's a library. You may be familiar with it. It's what's used in gzip, which you probably find all over the Unix world, and also in HTTP traffic. And so it's nice because this library can be applied to a lot of things to just make stuff smaller, right? Well, so those are the 4. And what we're really interested in is actually this ARC4 here. And so I've got a little bit of room left over here. Let's see if we can get through ARC4.
Okay.
So the thing about ARC4 is actually RC4. And this is an algorithm that I've been using a little bit recently because of its performance. and in that it is a symmetric. It's our symmetric key algorithm, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is also a stream cipher. And the cool thing about it is it was actually designed by this guy, Ron Rivest. Remember him from this discussion here on RSA?
Oh, yes.
Well, Rivest, in 1987, developed this, and it was his fourth. It actually stands for Rivest Cipher 4. So I guess it was his fourth cipher. And it was really popular. It came out in 87, super popular because it was super fast. It was very easy to implement. But here's the thing about this. It was closed source.
Oh.
I'm just going to put a sad face there, right?
We like our open source over here.
Open source is good. Well, the thing about this is the code was leaked.
Oh, no.
In 1994 to the cypherpunks mailing list. And the thing about it is, like, the source code gets released.
Yeah.
Suddenly, it's not a trade secret anymore. However, it still is a trademark.
So you can't
in fact,
use
RSA,
the name RC for it.
RSA has still never publicly opened this. You know, Ron Rivest will make some mentions of it. So it's like, I don't know if it's like a sore topic or anything, but basically, 94. You know, the cat's out of the bag, but that's really cool because then a lot of people can implement it.
Yeah.
However, since the name RC4 is actually trademarked, that's where we get
ARC4. Oh, that's funny.
Or yes, and when you're using SSH or SCP, you can, like I said, choose any of these.
Yeah. One
of the things that I've noticed, because I've been doing a lot of transferring of large files over SCP, SCP being the SSH copy command for like Unix, Linux servers and stuff, is that I will use the TAC-C ARC4 option, and that right there is going to say, hey, you know, sure, use my public keys or whatever, you know, authenticate however you normally would, right? But when it comes to exchanging this symmetric key here, we're going to be using this guy, which is hella fast.
Why is that one faster?
It's fast because
because of this?
It's actually, I think one of the reasons it's fast is actually that it's weak.
Oh,
and
really?
so I bring all of this up because if you've done any sort of stuff with, say, Wi-Fi encryption, you've probably already come across RC4. In fact, if you've browsed the web, you've run into it. RC4 is very popular. Yeah, it's actually used in SSL, aka TLS, as well as WEP. You want to talk about pre-shared key? WEP, or wired equivalency protocol. And this isn't a...
We all know WEP is very insecure.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that the way that symmetric keys work is that they're typically combined with what's known as a initialization vector. Which is basically a fancy word for, I'm not diving into this right now, we're going to say these are pseudo-random numbers, okay? And so we combine the symmetric key with these random numbers or these IVs or initialization vectors, and what that's going to do is you know, it's going to make it stronger, and yet at the same time, there can be what we know as weak IVs or weak initialization vectors. And these are basically, these guys can be attacked with what are known as known plain text attacks.
That sounds like a rainbow key. Or a, what is it called? Big rainbow?
Table.
Rainbow table, yeah.
Right. Well, I don't know if a rainbow table can be used in the practical nature of a known plain text attack. Perhaps it can. Probably in that the way that this works is that a known plain text attack is where you have both a sample of the plain text as well as a sample of the ciphertext, and using some you know, cryptanalysis, you can say, you can determine if there are any of these weak IVs. And if you've ever used the like aircrack suite, you've run across this. And if you collect enough of these weak IVs or numbers that just aren't, you know, random enough, or you are able to not just you know, decrypt the text, right? Well,
Yeah.
you've already got the ciphertext and the plaintext, but you're able to reveal the key. And this is why WEP.
Really?
Yeah, and this is why
Oh.
using certain methods that do like replay attacks, right? Where on a wireless network, I generate a lot of traffic. So I already know what the traffic is because I'm generating it. So I've got the plaintext equivalent of it. And I'm sniffing out of the ether the ciphertext of it. Then I can put together these weak IVs. And if I have enough of those, I can pretty much use a known plaintext attack to say, aha, that right there is the key.
Well, I hope you're not using this on any kind of very important documentation that you've been sharing.
I'm actually using this to transfer very large video files that will end up making their way onto the YouTubes. So the way that I figure is it doesn't really matter. However, I thought I would bring this up because it's interesting to note the different options that you have here in the symmetric keys that you can use and kind of the interesting history that Arc4 has. And then this leads into discussions that we can now later have about the rest of these guys. In the context of other security as we make our way into, private networks and GPG and private messaging. Oh my gosh, there's plenty of them.
Insane.
This is really just a handful that it supports, but there are tons of symmetric and asymmetric algorithms.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So I figured that'd be
very
fun.
exciting.
We filled the board.
Awesome. Yeah, so much. I feel like I just gained so much intelligence.
Well, I'm really hoping that we have some follow-up questions on this, which we will be taking in a future episode. And from here, we're going to work our way into other types of proxies, as well as chaining proxies and VPNs and private messaging and off-the-record GPG, PGP, Tor, private networks, Zipper, all sorts of other fun stuff. There's a big roadmap, but I hope you guys are enjoying this. Let us know. If you have any questions on any of the stuff that we talked about here, of course, feedback at hak5.org.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have plenty of really good questions that I didn't bring up during the talk.
Yeah. And so let's just take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll find out about trivia and the Technolost Photo of the Week. Yes. We'll be right back. If you're setting up a website for your new business, showcasing your portfolio, your new blog, domain.com is the best place to go for your next great idea. If you need to register a new domain, consider getting a new .com. You see, a .com is the original. We all know it's the best. It's globally understood. It has immediate credibility no matter what name you choose. Or if you're even into investing in buying and selling domains, .coms have the greatest aftermarket value. Find new .com domains over at domain.com. Shannon and I love them because they're so easy to use, they're affordable, they're reliable. Plus, domain.com, they're so active on social media like Twitter. They're at domain.com. They got great customer support. It's really just a fun place to do business. So the guys over at domain.com want to hook our fans up with an additional offer. Get this, 15% off the already affordable domain names and web hosting if you use the coupon code HAK5, HAK5 at domain.com's checkout. That's 15% off and big savings. So don't forget to use the coupon code HAK5. When you think domain names, think domain.com. Now, before we get going, it's time once again for the Technolost Photo of the Week.
Yes, it is. Now, I put up a little bit of a collage this week because we had a whole bunch of photos come in of very old school Technolust.
Oh, like what?
Like, all right, so Dave sent in this picture of his 1990 TRS-80 Model 1 Level 2. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of a Trash 80. I'm not familiar with the Model 1 Level 2,
80.
right?
Yes, that is exactly what he called it in the email.
I love those guys.
Hilarious. Carlos sends a photo of one of his clients' dinosaurs of a computer. Hilarious. Jason also sent in a picture of his old PDA. It's this old HP Jornada.
Oh, that was one that flipped out. I love that guy.
Yeah,
yes,
dude.
I wanted one of those so bad.
I can't believe you still have that thing. Oh my gosh. And Miguel sends in a few photos of a desktop machine from 2001 that he is currently working on rebuilding.
Yeah.
With a nice old boob
CRT?
tube. Yeah, it's horrible. So you guys, thank you for the photos. They're awesome. And make sure to send your pictures over to feedback@hak5.org.
And now, of course, it's time for trivia.
The trivia. Last week's trivia question was, the maximum theoretical throughput of a SATA Rev 3 connection is what?
6 gigabits per second.
Yep, that is correct.
What's this week's?
This week's question is, when was the Microsoft IntelliMouse, the first successful optical mouse ever, When was that released?
You're talking about the one that's on my desk. I
believe
use the
so.
original.
You still use that?
No, the very first IntelliMouse, the one that can be used left-handed or
Yeah.
right-handed, not the blue one, but the original like
Yeah.
I buy them in bulk.
Wow.
And then I keep them like in the cellophane. Yeah, because when they die, I replace them with the exact same IntelliMouse.
Oh my god, that's so
I'm a freak.
funny.
I know.
You're
but
crazy. I have like a Logitech gamer mouse or
dude, it's the
something
best.
at
It's got the
home.
thumb and pinky buttons. I hope I'm thinking of the right
Oh my
mouse here.
God.
But anyway, I want to say what year it was, but no, the scroll is epic on it. It's got the clickies.
Oh
Paul
my
uses one of those mighty mousey thingies.
A Mighty Mouse?
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't
that's
know.
a cartoon.
That's
My
what
Little
that's
Ponies.
exactly how I feel about it.
Well, you guys can answer the trivia question over at hak5.org/trivia for a chance to win some swag out of my swag bag.
All right. Now, of course, as we've told you, we totally value your feedback. So if you have questions on the stuff that we've covered, you have something that you want us to cover, go ahead, hit us up, feedback@hak5.org. If you put the episode number in the title, that would help tremendously as well. We are putting together a ton of awesome follow-ups to so many great questions that we've gotten. So feedback@hak5.org. Make this show two-way street. We'll share keys and public
Yes.
isometric. I'm making stuff up now.
Oh, Lord. And don't forget, you guys can always follow everything we do over at hak5.org/follow. We need to put a calendar up for all the conventions.
Oh, we've got a lot of good stuff coming up.
Yes, and you'll find links to all of our social networks and whatever's going on right over there, hak5.org/follow.
And you can also support the show if you like what you're seeing. You want to give us a little moolah, you can head over to hackshop.com. Not only can you give us moolah there, but we'll send you cool stuff for it. We got awesome new gadgets, t-shirts, and other cool fun stuff
Yeah, we got
to get your
Michael
hacking
Austin's
on.
new Pro land tap. No soldering required. It just comes in a case in a nice little box. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
You could walk in the door and be like, I'm Uber Pro, let's go. I'm gonna tap your LAN.
And with that, I'm Shannon Morris.
I'm Darren Kitchen.
Remember to trust your time to last, y'all.
Nice emphasis.